you preach about love, but isn't that just too weak for the moment that we're in today?
My faith teaches me that love is the strongest force in the universe. Love is not passive. Love is not neutral. Love is not weak. Sometimes love requires that we stand between the bullies and the bullied. Love sometimes requires that we look evil in the eye and not blink.
Amen. That was James Talarico. He just beat Jasmine Crockett in the Democratic primary for a Senate seat in the state of Texas. And the real question now remains, does he have what it takes? Does he have the special sauce to flip this Senate seat from red to blue for the first time since the 1980s? Now, let's talk a little bit about the primary race, because I think that it could be a teachable moment for members of the Democratic Party if they choose to see it as a teachable moment, because I think that there are people who kind of mistake what it means to fight, right? So for me, being a fighter doesn't mean trashing the other side. It means fighting for what's right, okay? So just keep that in mind as I present the details of what happened to you. So if nothing else, Talarico's messaging was more appealing to Texans than Crockett's was, which again, I think could be a teachable moment for Democrats. So Talarico got about 52% of the vote, whereas Jasmine Crockett received about 46%. Now here is Harry Enton with a little more data on how this race played out. And then I'll talk about their differences in style, even though we're talking about two Democratic candidates. Take a look.
Tremendous turnout. I mean, woof. Texas Democratic Senate primary turnout, the highest ever was this primary. We're already up to 2.3 million, and that's only with 92% of the estimated voting. It's not just that this 2.3 million is such a large portion, the largest ever for a Texas Senate Democratic primary. It's that more people voted in the Democratic primary than the Republican primary. Look at this, share of Texas midterm primary ballots. Look at this, the 2000s average. If you look at the 2000s on average, you see this, Republicans outvote Democrats. More people choose the Republican ballot than the Democratic ballot in midterm primaries by 60% to 40%, a margin of 3-2. But look so far, Democrats, more people are actually choosing the Democratic ballot.
Pretty impressive, actually. So the turnout among Democrats was pretty strong in this race, which means they were super motivated to get involved. And when you take a step back and you think about the two different candidates, I mean, consider the fact that you have Jasmine Crockett, who really made a name for herself as being like this firecracker who's willing to, rhetorically speaking, fight against the right. Now, there were some things in her record that were concerning. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Talarico presented himself as a populist candidate and also an individual who is guided by his faith. And I personally do not have any problem with that. I have nothing against people of faith. I do have a problem with people who use their religion to control others. I don't get that sense from Talarico at all. And so I think that his messaging was just a lot more effective, because I know it doesn't seem this way to a lot of people, but my sense is that most Americans are exhausted. Most Americans are tired of the division. They're tired of nothing ever getting done. They're tired of like the hyper partisanship, the polarization, and the inability to come together as a country. Talarico cut through that and had a message of unity and love. And you would think, okay, well, in an era where Democratic voters really want a fighter, Talarico is not going to be an appealing candidate. But apparently nothing could be further from the truth. And I personally love to see it. This is my bias, so you might not agree with it, and that's totally fine. I personally am exhausted with the divisive politics. I want to find ways to build coalitions and bring Americans together. I want to live in a country where we see each other as fellow countrymen and women. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's what I crave and I want so badly. And I think that there could be an emerging thirst for that among the American people, and that excites me big time. So with that in mind, as you saw in the cold open, the first video that we showed you, Talarico has repeatedly invoked his faith on the campaign trail. So that, coupled with his populist messaging, helped him appeal to more voters. His approach resonated with a majority of Democratic primary voters Tuesday, who chose his offering of a political reset over Crockett's promise to unapologetically wage partisan warfare against the GOP. And guys, it depends on what you mean when you say partisan warfare. Is it simply yelling and screaming during a hearing or a press conference? Or is it fighting in a tactful way, a strategic way on policy to actually, accomplish legislative wins? And with Jasmine Crockett, there was a lot of theater. I definitely will give her that. She presented herself as a fighter, but talk is cheap, especially right now. And there were things in her record that really bothered me, including her, complete capture by the Israeli government. And she was unapologetic about that, by the way. And I do think that it hurt her in the end. Now, here's more from Talarico. Take a look.
In my experience, when you extend an open hand instead of a closed fist, you'll be surprised by who takes that hand. That's how I flipped a Trump district in a red county. That's how I passed major bills in a Republican-dominated body. If you hate politics and you've never voted before, you have a place in this campaign. If you've voted for Democrats, but you're tired of DC Democrats always folding, you have a place in this campaign. And if you voted for Donald Trump, but you are fed up with the extremism and the corruption in our government, you have a place in this campaign. A new kind of politics is possible. It's waiting to be born through all of us. And a movement that radiates that kind of love is unstoppable.
What I appreciate about him and Mamdani, and I think this was also a winning strategy, was that they reached out to Republican voters. And they treat voters in general as human beings as opposed to a label. And that's so important, because this idea that someone is like a demon simply because they voted for the candidate you don't like is wrong. And I just think that you have to reach out to people, even if you can't persuade them to vote for you or support your cause. You get something out of the experience of having that dialogue, having that conversation. By reaching out to people who voted differently, you get to kind of understand them better, as opposed to falling prey to the way the media, for instance, the partisan media describes these voters. So I love the fact that he did outreach in red areas of the state, especially these Trump strongholds, because he wanted to understand them and he wanted to see if maybe there's common ground. Maybe there's something that he can offer these voters that they would find appealing. Now, Talarico is a Texas state legislator. He's a Texas state legislator, so meaning he's a lawmaker within the state legislature. And he did work as a middle school teacher in the past. He's also a Presbyterian seminarian, which means that he has pursued a formal education in the Christian faith. And if you're wondering, okay, well, where does he stand on the issues? Enough about his faith. Like, that has no impact on my life whatsoever. That's fair. That's totally fair. But to give you an idea, let's watch 2 of Talarico's campaign ads.
Billionaires don't just influence politicians, they own them. That's why I don't take corporate PAC money. It's why I fought to cap campaign contributions.
In the Senate, I'll ban billionaires from making unlimited secret donations.
I'll stop members of Congress from trading stocks, and I'll raise taxes on those at the top to fund tax cuts for the rest of us.
I'm James Talarico, and I approve this message because our government should work for all of us, not just billionaires. When I was 28, I almost died. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. When I picked up my first insulin prescription, it cost me $684. I couldn't afford that. Most Texans can't either. So when I got to the Texas House, I took on Big Pharma and capped insulin at $25 a month. I'm James Talarico. I know what it means to fight for my life. I approve this message because in the Senate, I'll fight for yours.
So, I mean, those are some pretty progressive proposals and stances. And according to Talarico's website, if elected to the Senate, here are some of the policies that he intends to push for. It includes a tax on billionaires' income and capital gains, raise the corporate tax rate, raise the tax rate on corporate stock buybacks. How about we just ban corporate stock buybacks? How about we do that? I think that makes a lot more sense. But anyway, implement $15 minimum wage. Obviously, this would be statewide. No, I'm sorry, he would be a senator, so he would push for it on a federal level. Create federal public option when it comes to healthcare. Expand the child tax credit. Ban institutional investors from buying single-family homes. Eliminate red tape to incentivize housing construction, which is, in my opinion, way more important when it comes to housing affordability. We do need a lot more housing stock in order to bring prices down, but I'm okay with banning institutional investors in the meantime. Require AI data centers to pay for their own electricity. I am 100% in favor of that. All of us should be. Repeal the Trump tariffs. I think Republicans can get behind that too. And also codify Roe v. Wade, which I'm sure will not be appealing to Republicans in the state, which is relevant for the general election. But it is interesting to hear that he would want to codify Roe v. Wade as a man of faith. And I think that you can totally be a person who believes the Christian religion and also believes in the standards that were set by the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade, which was to ban abortions at the point of viability, meaning at the point a fetus can survive outside the womb. So anyway, what about foreign policy? This is where it gets good. It gets so good. Because I think this is going to be a big factor in upcoming races. Talarico was on the right side when it came to foreign policy, especially when it came to Israel and AIPAC. So here's what he said when he was asked about Israel and AIPAC in December of last year.
Taking money from AIPAC, and I'm not taking money from AIPAC in this campaign. Seeing what's happening in Gaza makes me sick to my stomach as a teacher, as a Christian, as a human being. And our country's role in that slaughter makes me feel complicit in it. I think all Americans should feel that. Yeah. There was a theologian who said, I screamed at God for the starving children until I realized the starving children was God screaming at me. I think God is screaming at us in Gaza right now, screaming at all of us. And so I've said, if I am elected to the US Senate, I'm going to use every bit of diplomatic and financial leverage to end the atrocities. I have already said I support banning offensive weapons to Israel. And I think we as a country have a moral responsibility to stop the death and the destruction. And we can. We uniquely as a country can stop it. And it's time for our leaders to find that moral clarity.
And just to juxtapose his position with Jasmine Crockett's, Jasmine Crockett was very supportive of Israel, took the congressional trip to Israel, has taken AIPAC money and has vociferously defended her support for Israel when questioned about it by Democratic voters. So I do think that hurt her in this race, and I'm glad that it hurt her in this race. I don't think that we should be electing any individual who supports Israel at this point. I think it's really important to elect anti-Zionists. And I mean that. Because if we don't, this is a threat to our country at this point. Because we don't have a government that looks out for us. We have a government that is beholden to a foreign country. And that's a huge problem, a huge problem. I can't imagine continuing paying the taxes I pay and seeing Americans struggle while my government takes our money and squanders it on endless foreign wars. But anyway, enough about me. As a state legislator, Talarico reduced prescription drug costs by capping insulin copays at $25 a month in Texas. He also lowered housing costs by replacing outdated regulations to increase the supply of apartments and condos. Guys, look, it's one thing to listen to what people say they want and then just regurgitate it, like tell them what they want to hear, but you never actually carry out successful policies. He already has a record of succeeding. I love to see it. By the way, I should also note, Texas is a much friendlier environment when it comes to zoning laws. And I think places like California could learn a lesson or two. We need to build, we need to build, we need to build. Please wake the F up. All right, these liberal yuppies who don't want to build more housing need to be shut down, and we need to build more housing. It's that simple. But anyway, he also lowered childcare costs by establishing property tax exemptions for childcare providers and increasing the supply of high quality centers. Oh, I love it. Now, compare all of that to how Jasmine Crockett announced her campaign for Senate. Because I mean, like, she's got a lot to compete with here. So maybe she had a super compelling message, but it didn't quite make the cut. Let's take a look.
How about this new one they have? Their new star, Crockett. How about her? She's the new star of the Democrat Party, Jasmine Crockett. They're in big trouble.
But you have this woman, Crockett. She's a very low IQ person.
I watched her speak the other day. She's definitely a low IQ person. Crockett. Oh, man, oh, man. She's a very low IQ person.
Somebody said the other day she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding.
Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
Disaster. Like, that was such a disastrous ad, honestly, because it's all about Crockett and it's framing everything as I'm Jasmine Crockett. I am going to center Trump and how I'm going to fight Trump as, the centerpiece of my campaign. It's more of the same. And I think people are ready for something new. And I think voters have gotten savvier, and they don't want someone who just talks the talk. They want someone who walks the walk. And based on what Talarico was able to accomplish already as a state lawmaker in Texas, it seems like he's not just talking about doing things. It seems like he really wants to accomplish policies that work. And honestly, the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you know how to negotiate. You know how to, compromise where it's not going to hurt your constituents, but you have to have some sort of working relationship with lawmakers on the other side of the aisle. And it seems like he's actually interested in reaching out to Republican voters on things that they would care about. And that might apply some pressure on Republican lawmakers to play ball with Talarico. I think that's a smarter strategy. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong. But what I do know, because it's already been proven in case study after case study after case study over the last 10 years, positioning yourself the way that Crockett did as I'm going to just destroy rhetorically the other side of the aisle doesn't really yield policy wins. So I hope Talarico wins. Obviously, Texas is a tough state for Democrats to win a Senate seat in, but I do think that he has an interesting message. I think that he's focusing on the right things. We'll see how it plays out, but I have a little bit of hope when it comes to the Senate race. So we'll see.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.